Back in high school, I was really into hair metal. And for those of you that don't know, we're talking Whitesnake and Bon Jovi and Cinderella and all this kind of stuff like that. I was super into it. And at the time, I was in a band with my friends. We were called Saints and Sinners, and then later Jester. And I'm laughing remembering it. And nonetheless, we played, versions of tunes that were popular in that genre at the time. We're talking in the late 80s. And so what I did for playing in the band, playing electric bass in the band, was to learn the songs that we were playing, obviously. And what I was doing when I was learning those bass parts was essentially transcribing, wasn't it? And yet I wasn't thinking of it as transcribing, I was just learning the song. Later, when I fell in love with this music and was sort of confronted with the idea of jazz transcription, it seemed so sort of daunting and intimidating to me, partially because of just the unfamiliarity, but also because it's a different sort of intention, and there's a lot different qualities that we're dealing with, isn't there? As far as the sound that we're hearing is very, very different. Sort of the recording quality is often very different, and you're listening to upright bass as opposed to electric bass, and so on and so forth. And it's a lot more complicated than hair metal for sure. So I understand any of us who have a sense of sort of trepidation about the transcription experience. And so I wanted to talk today briefly about some perspectives about transcribing that I hope will help you and encourage you to go forward. And also I'm going to provide some sort of tools for you, I hope, to get you started on that path if you haven't already, or keep you motivated to continue on that journey. One important thing that I wanted to point out is that oftentimes when we talk about transcribing or transcription, like in the English language, we're also, or can be, talking about writing out words, what somebody is saying. We're transcribing what they're saying. And the idea is really formally like you're writing it down. Here in the transcription of music, we don't have to write it down. In fact, it's not the end goal at all. And if your intention is to increase your vocabulary, to have an understanding of the language better, to just, apply it in any kind of way, writing it down as a goal is actually sort of harmful in a way. We need to write it down to communicate with others. If we want to remember it, maybe that might be an idea, but that shouldn't be your actual ultimate goal. So if you have any kind of reservation about sort of what the rhythms are, the rhythms are tricky to write out, or you just don't feel like writing it out for whatever reason, don't worry about it. That's actually not the intention. Ideally, we want to memorize what we are transcribing and be able to sing it and play it back, memorize it on our instrument and so on, so that it becomes something that is inside of us that we can use. And so don't worry about that part of the transcription thing that we think about out in the world of writing it down. You don't have to do it. I did it a lot for a lot of reasons. I mean, my Ray Brown transcription book that I'm very, very, very proud of was, to share that with others, to share these transcriptions with others. But I did end up memorizing whole tunes, 8 minutes of bass lines for some of those tunes. And that was super, super helpful in, allowing me to understand more about creating bass lines for sure. Nonetheless, please understand you don't have to write it down. Please understand that listening a lot is one of the main keys, and listening so much and so deeply that you are able to hopefully sing it, if not, at least be able to sort of replicate it. You don't have to be a good singer, but try to sing along with it. Really understand the material as a melody in and of itself. Don't think about it just in little chunks, although we might have to transcribe it that way. You really want to internalize the actual material itself. So once you've really internalized it, you're going to want to actually figure out what the notes are, right? And there is a whole process that's very, very intense, if you're into this, that my friend Kurt Stockdale, who I told you about before, taught me about, where you are transcribing a whole solo, for example, without your instrument at all. You start with one reference note, like a tuning fork, and then you go from there. You transcribe the piece by ear, no instrument. And that is hard. I've done it several times. I should do it more. It is very, very hard, but boy, is it satisfying and fulfilling, and you learn a lot from doing it that way. That said, Let's say we're going to use our instrument, which is fine. Once you've internalized it, you're able to sing it, you understand what the bass line or the melody of the solo is. Think about the context clues that will help you to figure out those notes. For example, harmonically, if you bare minimum figure out the relative key of the song if you can. That is going to give you a lot of clues. And if you can figure out the harmony, or if you already know the tune, what the chords are, that will of course give you a ton of information about what the likely choices are with what is happening in the moment. Also, when you are in the process of transcribing, let your ears acclimate to the experience. Here's what I mean. When I'm working on something and sort of struggling to figure something out, and I'm making a bunch of changes to the setting of the listening experience. So I'm turning the volume up, or I'm using software to slow it down or speed it up or change the key or whatever. Every time you make a change, your mind has to sort of reacclimate to getting inside the sound of where the bass is in the mix or whatever instrument you're doing. So allow yourself, or understand that you want to try to sit with whatever the oral experience is of the moment for a while, and let yourself sort of surrender to what that sound is, and your mind will start to piece through and wade through the various sounds and get to that particular sound you're looking for. So if the bass is hard to hear, keep listening at the same volume with the same equipment and so on and so forth for a little while, trying to pay attention to the bass, and your mind will acclimate. Now, going along that route, also consider the actual equipment that you're using. You really want to have good audio quality. This doesn't mean you are audiophile level, equipment. That's not necessarily important, but having a good way to play the music back and having a good set of headphones is really critical to this experience. So I mentioned software to work with the song, to manipulate it in some way. And the one that I use is called Amazing Slowdowner. And I think there's other ones too, but I know this is a popular one, and it's really, really worked for me. I'll show you up on the screen here that there is a lot of things you can do with a simple and free version of this app, as far as slowing it down, setting loops into very small increments. In fact, you can loop, a couple beats. And importantly, as far as what we're doing with the bass, you can change the pitch. And here's why it's important. If you put the pitch up to 12, you are putting it up an octave. And when you put it up an octave, the bass becomes much clearer because the bass sounds are up an octave. Now, please understand, there's a caveat there. You've got to double check it against the normal octave, because the higher octave will sometimes give you false notes because of the overtones. But sometimes if you're in a really tricky spot, putting it up the octave is really, really going to help you out and help you understand what those bass notes are. That's really helpful. And of course you can slow it down to a reasonable speed. And I would say, like, don't, again, as I was talking about earlier, don't slow it down and speed it up and slow it down and speed it up a bunch, or slow it down to 75% and then jump to 50 and then 75, because your ear can't acclimate to that as quickly. Stay at one sort of speed if you can, and then change it over time. Additionally, if you are a CD user, then they actually, I don't know if they still make them, but I have a very good machine that actually allows you to manipulate CDs as far as slowing it down and so on and so forth. I think Tascam makes it. I have to double check, or Boss or something. I'll double check. I realized I didn't even think about it. But nonetheless, so using software can be very, very helpful in that whole process. Additionally, as you're considering what you are listening to, consider the recording quality itself, the period of time of the recording, and the player. Here's why that's important. When we're talking about music that is like pre-1950 something, gut strings were used. Steel strings did not come into reality, my understanding, until the late 50s or early 60s, perhaps. And I think it was just the beginning of that. So you're dealing with gut strings before that. And gut strings and steel strings have a different sort of flavor profile, so to speak. as far as like the overtones that often come out on recordings. So understanding and being able to identify when you are listening to gut strings will actually allow you to make better choices about what you think the notes are, because there are some overtones that aren't present or some that are, and so on and so forth. So you're considering the time period and of course the recording quality. Now, recording quality has gotten much better, of course, but that doesn't necessarily mean the bass is easier to hear. I got a bone to pick with a lot of engineers. Nonetheless, so understanding that context is helpful. And then also understanding if a player, for example, likes to use very, very long notes as opposed to shorter notes, for example, or knowing what kind of strings they use, for example, will make a difference. Like Christian McBride, his type of strings are going to be a very definitive sound, and you can lock into that sound and sort of understand note choices actually better based on knowing his sound versus Ron Carter. And also the way they play, right? The length of their notes tends to be slightly different too. So that's going to make an effect on how you are transcribing the piece. Also, understand why you're transcribing. This is a huge thing and can be a part of the reason why we don't start on it, because like, why am I doing this? There are a lot of reasons that we can do it. And I think being clear going into it will be really helpful. Are you trying to improve your ear? Are you trying to improve your ability to transcribe itself? Are you trying to learn language? Are you trying to understand a certain player more? Like, what are their articulations? How do they play X, Y, Z? If you want to learn a new song, that's a reason too. If you are trying to sort of figure out what to play, like note choices on a certain kind of progression, that can be a reason to transcribe. So knowing those things going into it is going to make a difference about what your transcribing experience is. If I'm transcribing a Cannonball Adderley solo that I love because I love the melody, that is a very different intention and also a different structure for how I transcribe versus if I am trying to get a bass line that Paul Chambers played on a blues. So both are absolutely great, but learning the melody to the solo, like learning the solo is about vocabulary, is about, I love this, I want to play like this, I want to put this inside me and manipulate it inside me. That is a different thing than I'm trying to figure out what Paul Chambers did on this particular part of a blues or whatnot. So I think that's probably pretty clear. Something I like to offer to you if you're feeling a little bit hesitant about the transcription process or feeling disheartened about transcribing, I want to try to give you sort of a lift, a push forward in the process and try to make it a little easier for you. The way that I came about, or what I came about to try to make it easier for you, is to choose a relatively easy bass line. This is a Ray Brown line from a tune called Funky Blues. It's a blues in C from Charlie Parker. I chose this bass line. I chose 6 choruses worth, so a couple pages worth of bass line. And I played it on video and on audio recording too. So I'll provide the audio to you, and you'll see the video right here. And you'll see 3 sort of versions of me playing it. A close-up of my left hand, my right hand, and my whole upper torso playing the piece so that you have a bunch of clues about what the notes might be if you're trying to figure it out. But additionally, I'll provide you with a cheat sheet or sort of a starter sheet where I've got all those courses laid out, and the beginning of almost every bar, I can't remember, has the starting note of what that bar is. So I'm giving you the note to start with. So you've only got to do part of it. And to make it a little bit easier for you too, I would suggest you go in sections, and that could be 1 chorus at a time. It could be 4 bars at a time, whatever is comfortable to you. Along that line, this is something that we do in a new course that I'm actually releasing. I'm really excited about it. On November 4th, I'm releasing Jazz Bass 101, Walking Essential Tunes. And this transcription thing is part of the multiple modules and topics that I'm dealing with, where I'm saying, let's transcribe something that is related to the topic that I'm talking about, but just focus on part of it. So, and we break down the various parts of a blues, for example, into 3 main sections. So just focus on the first 4 bars. The next, top module is focus on the next 4 bars, next module, the next 4 bars, and so on. So it's the same transcription the whole time, but I'm saying don't do the whole thing at once. And here too, in this video here, if you're taking this on, you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to write it down once again. So I'll provide this PDF to you, an MP3 for you, and of course, this video of Funky Blues, hopefully easier to hear than the original recording with Ray Brown, early Ray Brown with Charlie Parker, which is pretty difficult to kind of make the bass out in that particular recording. I'll put a link to it below. But I'm really excited about this sort of idea that I came up with. As I say, it's part of my course, Jazz Bass 101, Walking Essential Tunes, coming out on November 4th. Mark your calendars if you like this idea. So now we're gonna watch this video that I did, and please save this for yourself and save that MP3 that is connected with it. And hopefully this will help you to make the transcribing process better. Thanks for joining me today. I'm so glad that you were here. Check below for links for PDFs and so on. And always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone. 1, 2, 3.